I'm trying to beat as many maps as possible without reusing a single monkey or hero. That means if we use Sauda and a dart monkey on Monkey Meadow, we won't be able to use them for the rest of the video, and every single run is on CHIMPS difficulty. To pull this off, we need a delicate balance of lead popping power, camo detection, reliable group damage for the dense late game rounds, and enough single target DPS to survive round 40's Moab and round 100's bad. I loosely planned everything out in an Excel spreadsheet, mapping upgrades, tracking which towers were spent, even leaving myself a few flex picks in case something went wrong, and a few things certainly did. We started on Monkey Meadow with Quincy in the middle of the track, probably the most iconic start in all of BTD6, the most recognized map and the first hero you unlock, and he can solo the early rounds without breaking a sweat. Right below him, we placed an engineer, putting him slightly closer to the end of the track. I knew we'd be picking up Pin, and I wanted him in a spot where he could really support Quincy once that upgrade comes online. Over the next few rounds, we built him up, sprockets first, then we picked up oversized nails and Pin, making him a 302. Now, his sentries are deploying fast enough to always provide a solid defense behind Quincy, and they're able to pin Bloons too, not just his main attack. But after that, I wasn't sure what the plan was. Quincy can handle the camo green on round 24, so no problem there. But round 28, the leads. That was the question. We had two options. Spend money on Quincy to get him to level 7 and unlock his exploding arrows, or we could save up for the sentry expert and let the engineer's specialized turrets deal with them. The problem? I didn't know how much XP Quincy would need or how much money we'd have by round 28, so I just let it run until it was time. Here, we had $3,281 to play with, which is more than enough to make a sentry expert, and almost immediately, he started placing boom sentries and laser turrets. They shredded the lead layers, and once that outer shell was gone, the rest of the balloons didn't stand a chance. Now, the only other tower I had budgeted for this run was a village. It's not exactly popping balloons on its own, but it makes everything else stronger. Since I didn't think we could afford to rush the sentry champion yet, and leveling Quincy manually is inefficient, this felt like the right time to drop it. We started with jungle drums in the 30s to boost our attack speed, then I made sure to grab radar scanner before the camo waves start ramping up on round 37 and especially in the 40s. And honestly, it worked beautifully. Round 37 and 38's layered balloons were no problem, even with leads being in the mix, and the ceramics weren't too bad. Once they got to the sentries, we broke open their outer shells and pinned them in place until they were popped. But that brings us to round 40, the first Moab of the challenge. The laser sentries broke it open on the first loop, and I was genuinely surprised with how fast we popped the insides. We locked them in place, and they just melted. Round 40 was way easier than I expected. But after that, I hit another crossroads. Do we go for the MIB, letting our towers pop every balloon type and future-proofing ourselves? Or do we commit to the Sentry Champion? It'd be a massive power spike and skyrocket our damage, but it would leave us weaker to purple balloons, since we'd be heavily leaning on plasma damage. Now, I wasn't too worried, as purples don't spawn that often, and Quincy should be able to clean them up when they do. Plus, the 40s are the perfect time to save up for a massive upgrade like a Sentry Champion. The rounds are relatively easy, and they generate a surprising amount of cash. So with this, we started saving. We cruised until the 50s when Moab started spawning again. At first, I wasn't concerned. I mean, we handled round 40 easily, and now Quincy has a few extra levels under his belt. But there was one problem. The Sentry Expert doesn't spawn random turrets. He reacts to what's on screen. If there are pinks, he spawns cold sentries to slow them down. If there are leads, he spawns boom sentries to break them up. And if there's a Moab, it prefers yellow laser sentries that deal bonus blimp damage. But on round 52, there was a mix of balloons layered together, so we had a scattered lineup of turrets, not all lasers. And one of the Moabs made it all the way to the second loop, much further than the round 41. But on round 53, where it's mostly Moabs, we got a full field of laser sentries and absolutely melted them. So as long as we have the right turrets up, we should be fine. And we beat these rounds without even using an ability, and only a few rounds later, we had enough for the Sentry Champion. At the end of round 56, we bought the upgrade and got our massive power spike. The plasma turrets smoked absolutely everything. And this is where the village placement from earlier really paid off. I purposely put it to the left of the engineer, close enough to buff both monkeys, but not directly next to him. Why? Because the engineer spawns sentries in open areas within his range. If I put the village next to him, he'd constantly be spawning turrets where the village currently is, and they'd really only cover the second loop. By placing the village where I did, I limited those spawns. Now, the sentries cluster near Quincy or the engineer, covering multiple passes instead of just one. This worked wonderfully, and we were crushing even the hard rounds like 63. The ceramic rushes were barely getting around the first loop, and we still weren't using Quincy's abilities. Round 64, one of the more underrated rounds didn't even reach the first bend. The fortified Moabs got shredded instantly, and during these rounds, we upgraded the village to a MIB, so we have no real weaknesses. This is where we hit our stride. Nothing was getting past Quincy and the Sentry Champion. With the MIB covering every Bloon type, not a single ability was needed, just steady control and a growing pile of cash. At this point, we had a choice. We could power level Quincy to 20, or we could upgrade the village to a call to arms and maybe even a homeland defense. This was a pretty easy choice. Quincy is tied for the fastest leveler in the game, so I figured he'd hit 20 on his own. So instead of dumping money into him early, we'd save for the village upgrades. And if something went wrong, we could always fall back and boost Quincy as insurance. And so we cruised. About 20 rounds of pure dominance, and on 78, we picked up the call to arms upgrade. Now this is one of the most beloved and honestly underrated combos in the game. Call to arms and the Sentry Champion. You don't see it very often in Chimps guides, but here's why people love it. The Call to Arms ability gives all your monkeys plus 50% pierce and attack speed for 15 seconds. For most towers, it stops there, but for the engineer, attack speed also determines how fast he spawns sentries. So when you activate the ability, he doesn't just attack faster, he spawns more turrets, which also attack faster. He effectively double dips the buff, and because this map is easy, we were actually able to push even further. On round 86, we upgraded it to a homeland defense, bringing the pierce and attack speed buffs up to plus 100% for each while it's active. That being said, we still didn't need it. Of the fortified BFBs on this round, only the super ceramics inside made it around the first loop. The ZMGs of 87 were slightly tougher as we had another layer to go through, but even them, we got down to Moabs on the first pass and most of our sentries were down below. Still, the real test was coming. DDTs. I genuinely wasn't sure how we'd handle them. They don't have the most health, but boy are they fast. The first ones come on around 90 and we popped them after the first loop. This was a good sign, but it made me a little nervous for 95 and especially 99 knowing we don't have any more upgrades we can buy. So I'm going to try to keep some abilities ready for those rounds. The early 90s were surprisingly smooth, with the first scary round being 94. Our monkeys were so focused on the BFBs early that the ZMGs actually made it around the first loop before breaking down. That being said, we had enough turrets at the end of the track to take them out before anything got close to leaking. But that was followed by round 95, and the DDTs quickly made it to our engineer. They slowly pushed through, but once they finished the second loop, I used Quincy's rapid shot, and that locked them right there. They stalled at the intersection until the final DDT popped. Next up was round 96, the highest RBE we'd seen so far. But because the round is so spread out, we actually handled it comfortably. No abilities needed. The ZMGs at the very end were still a little tense, but manageable. The two fortified ZMGs of 97 were next, and this is a weird round. Sometimes it feels easier than 95 or 98, and other times it's brutal. For us, it was a bit tough. We needed rapid shot just to break the ZMG layers, and when those fortified super ceramics came pouring out, they pushed further than I'd like. The first group almost made it to the right side of the screen, so I used Quincy's level 10 ability to wipe the second half of the round. Then came 98. I knew this one would be a doozy, so I activated Homeland Defense right away. The extra attack speed and Pierce sent the Sentry Champion into overdrive, flooding the screen with plasma turrets. Very few Bloons made it past the first loop until Homeland wore off, but by this point there weren't enough left to pose a threat, and the round lasted long enough that our abilities were almost all back for 99. Here, I only used Rapid Shot to break open the fortified DDTs, but for the first time all game, a Bloon reached the final pass. It was just one black Bloon that we cleaned up, but wow, was that close. And then came the round 100 bad. We needed raw, single target damage to crack that outer layer, so we stacked Homeland Defense and Rapid Shot together. The bad broke open, the DDTs popped shortly after, and we used Quincy's Storm of Arrows to take out the rest once we got them down to just Moab. Just like that, we beat Monkey Meadow with 3 towers, leaving us plenty for the next map, in the loop. We started with a 0-1-0 Druid between the 2 loops on the right. This spot gives him plenty of coverage, and those extra projectiles of the middle path help him handle the early game. This carried us to round 10, where we could afford to put Hbomb right next to him. Hbomb's early game is elite, he'll give our Druid camo detection later on, and his brambles are a lifesaver for the tougher rounds. We followed this with hard thorns for some extra pierce, and added a sniper on round 14, our third and final monkey of the run. For now, I set him to strong to help thin out the pinks and yellows, but here is where I got a bit stuck on what to upgrade next. There were several options, but I settled on making our sniper a 1-2-0 and setting him to first. Now he can pop more layers, see camos, and his shrapnel actually puts in work on any bloons behind his main target. And once we got back up to $1,500, I upgraded him to a 2-2-0 for some much needed single target damage. That means we only need help with rushes. So we went back to the druid and made him a 1-3-0 druid of the jungle. This guy's vine absolutely destroys dense packs of bloons as it damages anything that travels over it. And since the druid's tier 4 upgrade was way too expensive, we went back to the sniper, making him a 3-2-0 deadly precision. This should give us the punch we need for the round 40 Moab. I still wasn't 100% sure where to go though, so I picked up Heart of Thunder for some extra crowd control. It's an upgrade I usually skip, but with such a limited team, I'll take all the help I can get. This was a mistake though, as going into round 40, we were $65 short of getting main Moab, which would have smoked the round. Even without it, we cracked the outer layer after the first sloop and cleaned up the insides in the second. Not ideal, but definitely not bad. Through the 40s, I had plenty of cash, but I wanted to play it safe. The plan was to greed straight for Spirit of the Forest, and I didn't want to commit to Jungle's Bounty early and then find myself short for a main Moab if things went south. By round 43 though, it was clear we could afford both. I picked up Jungle's Bounty, and those double vines made light work of the mid game. Between the druid and the sniper, most bloons didn't even get to Oben. We were basically printing money while two monkeys did all the work, and we didn't have many weaknesses. Ceramics were getting one shot, Oben was giving our druid camo detection, and unless we got pierce capped, we were fine. Then the 50s hit, and things got sketchy. Moabs were still breaking in the first loop, but as soon as they started doubling up, it got tense. Layered ceramics were pushing deeper than I liked, but I had to remember that things weren't over if they got past our monkeys. Our druid and sniper both have global range to clean up any stragglers that get through, and we always cut up on the bloons when they got to Oben's slowing totem. That thing is always incredibly useful. My goal was to get the Spirit of the Forest by around 60, as I don't know if we'll be able to pop the BFB as is. We could always pick up main Moab, but that could leave us short for the Spirit for around 63. Luckily, Oben hit level 10 on round 56, giving us Wall of Trees as a final insurance policy, and we were able to buy the Spirit of the Forest a few rounds later. And once those permavines hit the track, it was a slaughter. The BFB didn't stand a chance, and rounds like 63 and 64 weren't even a threat. The fortified Moabs were dying in the first loop, and the ceramic rushes were popping before they even entered the screen. From here, we coasted. Nothing was strong enough to push through the Spirit of the Forest, especially after we added a main Moab to stall the heavier blimps. I basically did nothing until round 80, when I realized we had the cash for the Cripple Moab, our final upgrade of the run. This brings our stalling to a whole other level, and makes any target the sniper hits take extra damage. The combo was lethal. The 80s barely made it to the first loop, and even the round 90 DDTs were a non-issue. We just stunned them at the entrance and cleaned up the ceramics before they even got to Oben. Speaking of which, on round 92, he hit level 20, upgrading his Wall of Trees and giving us a massive safety net at the back of the track that can catch up to 7,500 bloons. But here is where the RBE really starts to ramp up. 93 sent a larger group of DDTs that actually squeaked past the first loop, and round 95 pushed even further. They made it to the water without much trouble, but the intro of the round is so long that it let us place a few brambles to help with the ceramics, and his Wall of Trees were large enough to actually hit blimps on the second loop, even though they were placed on the third, making the DDTs a bit easier. Round 96 is where the Spirit of the Forest Pierce really started to shine. The vines passively broke down the BFBs, giving us a constant stream of Moabs and ceramics to deal with. But this is where his main attack and strongest vines are active, letting the druid take them out pretty easily. And once the BFBs were gone, the sniper perma-stalled the ZOMGs, making for an easy end of the round. And 97 was more of the same, perma-stalling the fortified ZOMGs until they were nothing but manageable Moabs. But 98 is always a scary one. Our sniper slowed down the front of that massive rush until they started breaking open, and then our two other towers started going crazy. These super strong vines in the middle of our loops did work against the fortified Moabs and super ceramics, but even still, some of them made it to the left side of the map, which we have not seen for a very long time. Luckily, the map is long enough that we popped them no problem, and barely anything even got to the Wall of Trees, and the non-fortified blimps that came out at the end of the round were much easier to pop. The fortified DDTs did scare me a bit with how far they were getting, but our trees ate a couple, and whatever DDT the cripple was attacking got stunned and melted. So as their numbers went down, things got easier and easier. And I refreshed Oben's trees right after the round, setting us up nicely for the bad. Now, we don't have the most single target damage with this setup, but I was hoping the cripple debuff with the Spirit's vines would be enough. This was something I didn't test, and man, did that bad get far. Even with me spamming brambles, the outer layer didn't pop until he made it to the top of the map, getting his children past our strongest vines. But our sniper was able to stall the DDTs until they were fully popped, and did it again with the ZOMGs, making for a surprisingly smooth ending for a scary round. And just like that, we beat our second map with just 3 more monkeys. Next, we have 3 mines round. I only budgeted a Zeely and a Super Monkey for this one because there's a 2 TC on the index that pulls it off. So how hard could it be? I started with a Zeely in the center near the gem pile and set her to strong. This way, her damage over time does more to stronger Bloons, and if they ever get too far, I'll just switch her to first to clean up. My plan was to mine as many gems as possible to afford the Super Monkey before the mid game, but I couldn't clear around 15. I tried tons of different targeting combos and restarting to place the Zeely in slightly different spots, but the pink rush was just too much. Maybe with more time and better placements, we could have made it work, but this is exactly why I budgeted 2 flex monkeys for the entire challenge. I had a ninja and beast handler left over, so I decided to bring Genji in to save the run. After being stuck for a while, I finally placed him to the left of the track and easily moved on. And in just a few rounds, we had the money to start the second gem pile. If you don't know, 3 mines round has a gimmick where you can spend money to mine the gems around the map, and in 10 rounds, they give you more money back, even in chimps. So we'll have a lot of money this run. And after we started this second cooldown, we went back to the ninja and made him a 201 for high pierce seeking shurikens that pair nicely with the Zeely's single target specialty. Still, the Bloons were making it a lap or 2 around each time, so I upgraded the ninja to a 202 on round 26 for a little more oomph. This lined up with the second gem deposit, which gave us $4,600 on round 29, letting us place a Super Monkey below the ninja. I was tempted to start upgrading him right away, but I held off. We have more important things to do, specifically saving $10,000 for the 3rd gem pile. We funded this mining trip on round 38, and since it takes 10 rounds to pay out, we had to face the round 40 Moab without any extra help, and it was rough. We broke the outer layer on the first pass, but those ceramics took 2 more laps to clear, meaning they were dangerously close to leaking. After that scare, I grabbed super range, knockback, and ultra vision on the Super Monkey to start slowing things down, give him more pierce and camo detection. I debated saving the cash to get a head start on the next gems, but I figured the safety net was worth it. Here, Zeely was level 7, so she started doing some real damage, especially to blimps, but she'll really make an impact when she hits level 10 and gets Moab Hex, one of the best abilities in the game. But now that we're in the 40s, the goal is simple: mine as many gems as possible and start stacking cash. And we hit the next pile at the end of round 48. It's a $25K investment for a $37,500 payout. The rewards are starting to get big, but so are the Bloon rushes as they're starting to make full laps around the track to the point where we couldn't really tell how far they were. Because of this, I upgraded the Super Monkey to a 022 for the extra pierce, and the Ninja to a 203 flash bomb. The long-term plan is a master bomber for the late game blimps, but for now, those stuns are helping out a ton. I mean, even round 55 was surprisingly clean. We just stunned the ceramic rushes until they popped, and we're sitting on 12 grand. I wanted to upgrade the Super Monkey, but the gem deposit was about to pay out, and that next one is juicy. I waited and spent a whopping $50,000 for our final expedition on round 58, a massive expense that'll return $72,000 on round 68. It almost feels like cheating making extra money like this in chimps, but now that the mining is handled, we can finally focus on our actual monkeys, which is nice because the 60s are right around the corner. The BFB on round 60 was an easy clear, but the regrows on 61 almost ended the run. It's rare that Zeely's Heartstopper ability actually comes in clutch, but we would have leaked for sure without it. And once we survived that, we finally upgraded the Super Monkey to a 023 Dark Knight on round 62. This gives him +2 Moab class damage, increases his pierce from 4 to 7, and makes his knockback a bit better. But that brings us to round 63, the second wall of the run. The rushes of ceramics just kept getting through time and time again, but we slowly figured it out. I just had to set a Zeely to last to take out most of the leads, letting the Super Monkey dump all of his pierce into the ceramics. Then it was just Dark Knight micro. I started him at the bottom of the loop, then moved him to the very end of the track once his ability came back off cooldown. This way he can catch any leakers while still attacking towards the center. It took way too many attempts, but we finally got the luck we needed. And at the tail end of the round, I upgraded the Ninja to a sticky bomb. I'm sure it would have helped a ton on 64, but I used Hex to clear the fortified Moabs without breaking a sweat, so I guess he'll make his impact later. The next few rounds weren't too bad. Anytime it looked difficult, I just used Moab Hex, like on 65, where it took out both BFBs. And the next couple rounds were smooth sailing, letting us get to round 68, and the miner gave us $72,000. Instantly, we upgraded the Super Monkey to a Dark Champion, giving him extra damage, pierce, range, the normal damage type, and his projectiles now bounce from balloon to balloon, similar to the glaive ricochet, so a huge power spike. This absolutely carried the rest of the mid game, and we made the Master Bomber on round 79, just in time for the ZOMG. For the rest of the game, I dumped my money into Azalea trying to get her to level 20, but I'm not even sure if that was needed. I mean, we beat rounds 95 and 96 without using an ability, and they weren't even close to leaking. Both rounds only made it one lap in. Round 98 was significantly tougher though. Those blimps are so tightly packed, and the fortified property makes them much tankier, so several BFBs and Moabs made it a couple laps in. But even this round didn't take a hex to beat. Our 3 monkeys took it down with just their main attack. They were probably close to leaking, but I wanted to see if we could get away without using hex. And this round gave us the money and XP to get Azalea to level 20, which was my first time doing that in years. Round 99 went off without a hitch, and we used hex to one-shot the bat. And just like that, we took down our 3rd map with 9 total monkeys used so far. Moving on, we have spa pits, and I'll be trying our first 2TC with a hero. The reason we've been using 3 monkeys so far is because we have more heroes than maps will beat, so we might as well use one every run. And 2 TCs with a hero are hard to come by, especially with the no reuse rule that we have. They normally need the best monkeys on the easiest maps, and we don't exactly have that luxury. But I figured if we were going to make it work anywhere, it was here. We started with a Buccaneer in the center, which held its own until we got Brickle right above him on round 10. To be honest, this run was pretty dry. We cruised to a 302 destroyer that absolutely smoked the early game. The only thing it can't hit is leads, but Brickle's sea mines covered that gap perfectly. And if we ever needed a burst of popping power or the normal damage type, Brickle's level 3 ability, Naval Tactics, turned the Buccaneer into a balloon grinder. Most of the time though, it wasn't necessary. We got the aircraft carrier up and running on round 39 before the first mob even showed its face. And on round 54, we got the carrier flagship. Having a tier 5 this early made the mid game a complete joke. The only thing left to spend money on was Brickle, but it wasn't really a priority. I just bought levels on her whenever I remembered. Throughout the game, I was placing her Megamind around the track to see where I could best use them, but most of the time they just timed out. This run was a complete bore until the mid-90s, specifically around 95. For some reason, I burned Naval Tactics at the end of 94. I think I was a little too relaxed for this one because of how easy it's been so far, but this meant the leads at the start of 95 were completely up to Brickle. We had to rely on her standard sea mines for most of them, and the Megamind popped to the rest once DDT started coming. Thank goodness we were able to get 2 of them down, as they bought just enough time for Naval Tactics to come off cooldown, and with this boost, our carrier flagship was able to pop the rest of the round. And we would have beaten round 96 on the first try, but I knew we needed a better setup for the finale. I restarted the round and leveled Brickle up to 20, and carefully placed her Megamines around the track as a safety net for later. Every Brickle fan talks about mine stacking and how amazing it is, but I don't know the best technique. Maybe I'll get a pro like Dorio to teach me in a video, but for now, I just spread them throughout the track, so when they do go off, they pop a ton of blimps. This worked great for round 97, as we cleared it with just our main attacks and the mines I placed on the previous round. But then 98 started, and our run came to a screeching halt. It took so long to figure this out. The secret was switching the flagship to strong at the start of the round to focus the ZOMGs. This broke open the first BFB later than normal, letting the ZOMGs get just far enough to be in range of the first Megamind, breaking them down to BFBs. Then it was a waiting game. We had to hold a second Megamind until the very last second to catch the leaking ceramics and break a ton of blimp layers. If our luck held, the planes could defend the exit until Naval Tactics came off cooldown. And after enough attempts, this eventually cleared the screen. Unfortunately, that left us completely drained for 99. Both of our main abilities were on cooldown, and we were basically defenseless while the fortified DDTs rolled through. Luckily, our Megamind came back when all the DDTs were out, and was able to break them all open, letting the Buccaneer handle the ceramics. Now all that's left is the bad. It slowly strolled through the map, but between our main attacks and a Megamind, it broke open pretty early, and we saved Naval Tactics for the DDTs inside, making for a pretty simple round 100. But just like that, we checked off spawn pits with a 2TC. Next up, we have Tinkerton, and I planned a fun one. I wanted to use the Alchemist Ace and Rosalia, but this meant we had to start the game off with an Elk. I gave it a shot, putting him in the top center of the map and setting him to strong. This cleared round 6 just fine, but I couldn't get past round 7 without messing with his targetings and picking up larger potions. And even with this, we got stuck on round 8 with almost no money. So I looked up the 2TC placement for him, which is actually at the bottom, and his targeting is usually set to last. Even with this though, I kept getting stuck around the $850 mark. I could get by if I picked up faster throwing, but then I would still lose before I could afford the ace or Rosalia. So after a bunch of attempts, I had to pivot. I swapped Rosalia for Gwendolyn, a cheaper hero that comes in at $785, one that we could afford on round 11. After getting her down, I kept the Elk on last as he'd hit a ton of Bloons with each throw, and we put Gwen on first. I wanted her farther forward to keep attacking to proc the heated up buff as often as possible later on. The next couple rounds were easy, as the only one that needed a redo was round 14, and we beat it on the second try. I don't know what changed the second time around, but I guess RNG was in our favor this time, and that gave us the money for the Monkey Ace. I placed him right above the Elk so he'd get Berserker Brood in the future, and set him to Figure Infinite. This flight path keeps him over the track a large portion of the time, making him very consistent for a low tier ace. We spent the next few rounds getting him to a 0-2-2 and started saving for Never Miss. It started smooth, but by the mid to late 20s, the Bloons were getting uncomfortably close to leaking, and we had to start mixing in cocktails of fire to get by. But in the middle of round 29, we finally grabbed the tier 3 upgrade. With Gwen on lead duty and our 0-2-3 ace handling the rest, we were stable. I wanted to make the ace a 2-0-3 for the raw damage, but we had to get the camo detection of the middle crosspath. To round it out, we upgraded the Elk to a Berserker Brew to give our ace extra pierce, damage, attack speed, and lead popping power. This setup shredded the early game, but the round 40 Moab was a reality check. It took much longer to pop than I was expecting, as the Bloons made it to the grass on the right. We didn't use Gwen's ability here, but that's still super far. Luckily, that puts us in the 40s, where the Bloons are easy and the cash comes flowing in. Aside from the occasional ceramics that'd get far, these rounds were a piece of cake, and we were able to buy the Spectre near the end of round 50. Going into this round I was nervous, but the extra levels on Gwen and using her ability made the first mob of the round much easier than the one on round 40. And once the Spectre was in the air, I knew we had the mid game on lock. Now, we just have to survive the long haul to a flying fortress. For almost 40 rounds, we did absolutely nothing. We just let the Spectre, Gwen, and Alchemist run the show while the Bloons walked into the rubber grinder. The only time I even touched an ability was on rounds 85 and 87. I just wanted to make sure we could clear the rounds, so I used Gwen's cocktail to help pop the ceramics. And in the middle of round 88, we could finally afford the Flying Fortress. He costs a whopping $91,000, but he can basically solo the game. A fair trade in my mind. Right after, I made the LK stronger stim to give the ace a bit more juice, though with that kind of attack speed, I'm not even sure how much it helps. We just had cash to burn, and we coasted through the 90s. Nothing made it too far on screen until 98, and even then, the Bloons didn't even make it halfway through the map. They did make Gwen proc heated up for the first time in a while though, which was a nice sight. Round 99 went down without issue, and I used both abilities on the bad, popping it right as it passed by Gwen. Overkill? Definitely. But that's the Tinkerton win with just 3 more monkeys. Now we're on to another 2TC. We started with Sauda near the beginning of the track and followed her up with a mermonkey on the stump. Quickly, we made him a 0-3-2, rounding out our weaknesses. Both of our monkeys can see camos, Sauda can pop whites and purples, while the mermonkey can pop the leads for the time being. And it made for a super easy save up to the Arctic Knight, which we bought on round 37. This added a ton of damage, but is also when zebras and ceramics started coming more often. In theory, we should be able to pop them, but problems arose when the mermonkey would break ceramics into zebras after they were out of Sauda's range, and she couldn't break them down to pinks until the final straightaway, not always giving us enough time to deal with them. This usually happened on blimp heavy rounds like 53 and 54, but it really escalated in the 60s. 61 took several tries as the Regrow zebras were layered on top of Moabs, making this even worse, and we had to rely on a well-timed sword leap and lucky bounces out of our mermonkey's ice jet ability. Around 64 is what gave me the hardest time. The sheer number of zebras that came out of 9 Moabs was too much for our monkeys, especially with 3 of them being fortified. Our only hope was to stall long enough for Sauda's sword charge to come off cooldown. You see, she just hit level 10, so we're about to use it for the first time. What finally got us through this round was using Ice Jet early on to break open the Moabs, and we had to get enough lucky bounces to let Sauda protect the exit until sword charge was ready. And once we used that ability, we were in the clear. Round 65 also took a few tries, as we had to micro Sauda to keep her popping zebras, and we got a very lucky trident to protect the exit. But once we beat this round, we could afford for the Poseidon upgrade, something that carried us for the rest of the game, and we could put our money back into Sauda to make her better at popping purples and zebras. From here, we coasted straight to round 98, which was the first one to give us trouble since getting Poseidon. To handle the sheer number of balloons, we had to wait until the ZOMGs broke open and then use Sauda's level 20 sword charge. This took out an obnoxious number of balloons, letting the Mermonkey clean up and save his ability for the fortified DDTs of 99. This let us first try the round, as those black blimps are not made to tank an ice jet from Poseidon, and we used all of our abilities on the bat. The outer layer made it very far, as we don't have the most single target damage, but we were able to clean up the insides at the top of the map, pretty close to the exit. Next up is Town Center, and we're bringing in Silas and Ice Monkey and Desperado. We started by placing the cowboy on the right side of the map. I wanted him near the back since the plan is to turn him into a Golden Justice later on. The problem is that a single Desperado usually isn't enough to start. Most runs need 2 to survive the early game. Because of this, I had to grab Quick Draw for the extra attack speed, which just barely got us through the first couple rounds. I wanted to rush Silas from here, but that wasn't happening. Round 8 was too much, so we dropped the Ice Monkey on the left side of the map. The goal is to freeze Bloons at the very edge of Desperado's range. Honestly, I didn't think these two would work that well together. I figured the Ice would just freeze Bloons inside Desperado's range and waste his shots since he can't pop them. But they made a solid team, and we had enough money to get standoff on Desperado just one round later. The Ice Monkey put huge dents in grouped Bloons like the blues on round 10, and the Cowboy could handle these spaced yellows on 11 and 12 with just a little micro. And in the middle of round 13, we were able to pick up Silas. We placed him right next to the Ice Monkey to maximize his slowing aura, but I was a bit bummed I didn't get to use the Ice Monkey for extra range. We followed that up with Bullseye on Desperado, giving him a crit chance that scales with distance, which is perfect since the balloons are barely in his range when they're on the left side of the map. It's a perfect setup. Plus, our ice now gets orbiting ice shards that adds a nice bit of free damage. From here, things smoothed out. Silas made a massive difference, especially once he unlocked his ice walls. With the balloons standing still, the Ice Monkey and Desperado would just shred through them, except for the white balloons on rounds 22 and 23. We had to rely on Silas's level 3 ability to beat these rounds. Frostbite lets Silas damage any balloon type for a short time, and it adds some bonus damage to those that are already frozen. I had never really noticed this extra damage before, but on round 25, we went from a bunch of purples stuck on an ice wall to the round basically being over, and shortly after, we made our Desperado a 2-3-0 Deadeye. This gives him a long-range rifle, a ton of extra damage, and the ability to pop frozen balloons, which is a huge bonus to our current setup. This made the next save up a breeze. We upgraded the Ice Monkey to a 204 Icicles. Not only does this give him extra attack speed, damage, and range, but it also gives Silas some extra XP, makes it easier to get more ice shards surrounding the Ice Monkey, and overall just makes our defense much better. The long-term plan is an Icicle Impale to shut down DDTs and ZOMGs, but I wanted to wait until Silas hits level 13 for that sweet tier 5 discount. So we pivoted back to Desperado and upgraded him to a Bounty Hunter at the end of round 45. This does a few things for us. On top of the extra damage, his 2 abilities become very useful. Take Aim now lets the affected tower damage black, white, and purple balloons, which is great for our Ice Monkey and Silas. The only thing we have to be careful of is the 50% uptime on Take Aim, but we can always bridge that gap with Silas's Frostbite if we hit a bad wave of whites or purples, and we can use his second ability, Mark to Pop, if there's a ton of tanky balloons on screen and we just need a burst of damage while they're outside of his rifle range. We didn't really see the true power of this combo until the 50s. Moabs were dying on their first pass, and ceramics were getting perma-frozen until they pop. Our single target damage was surprisingly good, and those ice shards were putting in work against anything that got in range. Everything was going perfect until round 63. The zebras pouring out of those ceramics were our downfall, as the Bounty Hunter just couldn't keep up. The solution was simple though. We used Take Aim on the Ice Monkey. This let him and his orbiting shards pop the zebras and whites, making it much easier for our monkeys to keep up. And for the final rush, I used Silas's level 7 ability, Frozen Cascade, to take out a good chunk of ceramics. Round 64 was surprisingly clean since Silas can now slow Moabs, but they still push past the Ice Monkey, which is further than I liked. However, this got us extremely close to the Golden Justice upgrade. It only took a couple more rounds to make him a 2-5-0, and the damage was obnoxious. I mean, he broke open the round 80 ZOMG in 2 shots, and the BFBs and Moabs inside, 1 shot each. And Silas hit level 13 on round 82, giving us a discount on the Icicle Impale. We'd had enough money for this upgrade for a couple rounds, but I held off until now to save some cash, and we'll be dumping the rest of our budget into the hero. Once the Impale was up, blimps were a non-issue. They were basically standing still, not to mention the massive jump in damage and more ice shards that came with this upgrade. From here, we just coasted into the 90s. This setup hard counters DDTs, so they weren't even an issue, but the sheer RBE of the later rounds started to test us. It really came down to how many Bloons the Golden Justice could hit with each shot. Luckily, Silas and the Ice Monkey specialize in grouping everything together. Round 94 was a perfect example of the struggle. We just couldn't keep up with the super ceramics without abilities. I had to start the round with Mark to pop and take aim on the Desperado to thin the herd, but it was just a matter of time until the ceramics got through. And eventually, I used Silas's level 10 ability, Frozen Burial, to freeze the entire screen and fill the map with ice walls. That bought us the time we needed to catch up on everything, while the Icicle Impale kept the ZOMGs pinned at the start of the track, which we easily cleaned up once they were the only Bloons left. Round 95 took this up a notch though. It took a while, but we finally cracked it by leaving the Desperado unstrung to focus DDTs, while the Ice Walls and Impale held off the ceramics. Once they finally broke through though, I used Mark to pop the rest of the DDTs and switched Desperado to first to prevent any leaks. Somehow, we cleared it without using Frozen Burial, as I thought we might need it for 96. Surprisingly, this wasn't the case, which would have been nice to know beforehand. Instead, I upgraded Silas to level 18 and set the Icicle Impale to first to stall the Super Ceramics. This let us keep Desperado on last to break open the BFBs early, and once a ton of ceramics got through, we switched him over to first, and somehow he popped everything, with a few of them getting mighty close to leaking. I was surprised as I lost this round quite a few times and just assumed we'd need a Frozen Burial, but we got kind of lucky with this one. And round 97 was one of the easiest rounds in a while. No abilities, no micro, just a free round. Funny how that works sometimes. Round 98 though. That one took a long time. We started by upgrading Silas to level 19, and we opened the round with a take aim on Desperado to give him the extra range to reach the very far left. Then we used Mark to pop to deal tons of damage to the blimps, and once the ceramics got far, we used Frozen Burial to freeze everything and cast the rest of our abilities to do some serious damage. Between that and some lucky ice walls, we finally cleared the hardest round of the run. That just leaves us with 2 more rounds. 99 was a piece of cake, as the Icicle Impale was easily able to stall the fortified DDTs until the Golden Justice could break them open, and there just weren't enough super ceramics in the round to overwhelm us. And round 100 is where the Golden Justice really shines. He's known for his infinite pierce, but he can basically solo the bad, and we had enough money to level up Silas to 20, which was a nice bonus. After we broke open the purple layer, we dropped one last Frozen Burial to guarantee the round. Totally overkill, but just like that, we took down Town Center with the Ice Monkey, Silas, and Desperado. But boys, that brings us to middle of the road. The run that took me the longest in this entire video. And that's because I chose to try a Corvus Mortar Monkey 2 TC. Don't ask why, I guess I was just feeling confident when I planned these out. We started with the mortar and rushed bigger blasts as fast as possible. These larger explosions make the mortar more forgiving and lets it hit more Bloons per shot. Some rounds took a few tries, but we managed to push all the way to 14 as is, where we could afford Corvus. And we all know that he's an early game carry. I just spammed nourishment for the extra XP and cruised to a 203 signal flare by round 23. This adds some damage, gives it a burn effect, and handles our camo problems, but we still had gaps. The mortar can't hit zebras and Corvus can't hit purples. The first time this was an issue was on round 32, but I found that targeting the first building is amazing for the mortar. The blast is large enough to hit Bloons all the way around it, making it much easier to break those purples open and decamo everything on 33. It didn't take much to get through the rest of the early game. The occasional ability and spell were used, but for the most part, we just had to micro the mortar. And in the middle of round 39, we were able to upgrade it to a 204 Shattering Shells. This is a massive power spike. The burn damage is high enough to one-shot ceramics, and it gets a huge bonus against blimps, letting us melt the Moab. The 40s were mostly free until we hit round 49. The sheer amount of zebras and rainbows actually overwhelmed the mortar, and I had to lean on Corvus to bail us out. We used Spear and Ember for those outer layers, and had the mortar clean up right behind the spear. After this though, we cruised. We'd get stuck for a few tries here and there, but nothing a spell or a targeting shift couldn't fix. Then came round 62. I'll be honest, I did not play this one well. I was trying to micro the mortar for the purples while also breaking open the blimps, and I missed a decent amount. But when the purples got to the end of the track, I cast Trample to clear the screen. The purples were still spawning though, so we continued to micro the mortar, and when they got to the exit again, we cast Soul Barrier to tank them. I love that Corvus lets you tank leaks in chimps if you have the mana, and we only let 8 through, so we had plenty of lives and time to get by. This left us with a couple blimps at the bottom of the screen, so we finished the round with Ember, a Soul Harvest, and Dark Ritual to make sure nothing else got through. And this might have been the easiest round 63 of the entire video. The Shattering Shells burned every lead-in ceramic down to nothing just by targeting the first loop, and we were able to upgrade it to a Bloons Incineration after the second rush. Now, this smoked the rest of the mid-game, even without me knowing how to micro it. I wasn't sure if we should leave it in the middle of the map, so Bloons would have to pass through the fires twice, if I should put it at the start to hit them when they enter and have a wall covering the exit, or if I should micro every shot. The nice thing was, it didn't really matter until Super Ceramic started coming on round 81. Their extra health let them blow through walls of fire, so I had to either help with Corvus or hit them with a shell, and I kind of combined them. We eventually got through by parking the mortar at the entrance, casting Echo and Ember, and then moving the Bloonsin to the middle of the map to catch the Moabs as they broke and help out with the ceramics. This became the pattern for the 80s. Start at the entrance, then pivot to the middle. And it worked wonderfully, letting us hit the 90s, having first tried most of the rounds. By this point, Corvus was level 20, which was a massive relief. No more nourishment spam. We can finally sit on a full mana bar and focus entirely on spells. Even with that, 91 was a nail biter. Corvus's spirit got bugged to only attack right next to him, so we had to move the wall of fire to the back of the track to catch any stragglers. And something I noticed here is how much Corvus's haunt is doing. Not only can he haunt Moab class Bloons now, but the explosions deal 30 damage, which helps a ton with ceramic cleanup as they're passing through the fire. But this was close, and it's not even one of the harder rounds yet. Both Corvus and the Bloons Incineration are micro intensive, and I'm definitely not the best at either of them, but the synergy is actually solid. The Bloonsin defortifies blimps, its explosions pop the purples that Corvus can't hit, and the walls of fire handles the zebras that were an issue earlier. It's a well-rounded duo. But that brings us to round 95. The round that I was stuck on for days. No matter what I did, I couldn't handle both the purples and the DDTs. I messaged several people on Discord asking for tips, and honestly, they helped a lot, but I never got through. The mortar can't solo the purples or DDTs, so we had to cast Vision and Trample to catch up on the purples, meaning the Bloonsin had to decamo every DDT for us to have a chance. It was actually a nightmare. But then, Shadow sent me a video of how to do it. The only thing? I didn't have the mana for all the spells required, so I had to redo round 94 and have Dark Ritual off cooldown. Here, we had to micro the Bloonsin around the loops to pop as many bloons as possible. This could hold off the rush long enough that a Vision Trample could pop every purple of the round, and we would move the Bloonsin back to the first loop. This would get a nice wall of fire going up there and be ready for the DDTs, because in this one spot, he could decamo all of them, but he can't pop them all, and that's where Corvus comes back in. We had to use Soul Harvest for mana and activate Spear, Aggression, Echo, and Ember to keep up with the DDTs. Then we cast Dark Ritual to keep his mana high enough to keep all these spells active. Once I knew we could keep up with the mana, we cast Storm and Frostbite to keep any bloons from getting through. And with this, we didn't even have to move the Bloonsin to finish the round. Corvus popped all the bloons before they even got halfway through the map. Finally, once it was clear we were going to beat the round, I turned off all of Corvus's toggleable spells. In case round 96 took a bunch of tries, I wouldn't have to turn them off at the start of every attempt. And thank goodness we did, because round 96 took a while. The trick though was to pop all of the fortified mobs with the Bloonsin and the early ceramics with Corvus. We did this by grouping a bunch together with Repel to get the most out of the Mortar Monkey. Then, when there were only BFBs and ZOMGs left, we cast Overload, one-shotting most of the BFBs, and cleaned up the last few with Corvus's main attack and the Bloonsin, only leaving the ZOMGs. We microed the mortar, and once they broke open, we cast Echo, Ember, used Dark Ritual, and followed it up with Frostbite and Storm, similar to 95. So we had plenty of spells going to take care of all the super ceramics that came pouring out, and we were hovering over Trample in case that was needed to clean up the round. But between our two spirits and our Bloonsin targeting a loop down bottom, that wasn't needed. Round 97 was an easy change of pace from the last couple rounds, as we just broke open the fortified ZOMGs with our main attacks, and then the Bloonsin defortified the BFBs inside, making for an easy ending. Then came 98. We opened with Aggression and Spear, using the Bloonsin to pop as many BFBs as we could get away with, before microing it to catch the super ceramics the spirits couldn't handle and the Moabs that came a bit later. Once the screen was mostly clear, I parked the mortar in the center of the track, waited for the ZOMGs to weaken, and then hit them with an echoed overload to delete almost everything. This only left 6 fortified BFBs, which our Bloons counters very well, but I made sure to take my time so we could go into round 99 with lower cooldowns. Surprisingly, this was actually pretty simple. We just made sure the Bloons hit every DDT as they came while keeping Spear and Aggression active. Some pushed pretty far into the map, but between moving the mortar and casting Frostbite and Ember, nothing got by, and that just left round 100 to finish the Corvus Bloons 2 TC. I microed the mortar every step of the way and spammed Soul Harvest every time it came off cooldown while moving Corvus to the right side of the screen. Once the bed was about to break, I cast Repel, Ember, and Vision to make sure we'd pop the DDTs. I'd lost an attempt before when they just ran through while the mortar was reloading, so I wasn't taking any chances. Then, once the ZOMGs broke open, I used Dark Ritual to refill Corvus's mana, then dropped an Echo Frostbite to buy time against the super ceramics inside. And just to be safe, I used one final trample to clear the screen. Middle of the road was finally done. Easily the longest and most exhausting run of the video. And of course, I followed it up with another doozy. I didn't think this one would be that hard, but we're on to 1-2 tree using Striker, the bomb, glue, and sub. I started with a submarine in the only opening, and Bloons got through the first round. I should have taken that as a warning, but oh well. We had the money to pair him with a glue gunner who was able to slow the Bloons down enough to beat the first couple rounds. It was nice because the glue could see the left track, letting him slow Bloons down before and during the sub's range. And this let us get to round 8, where we bought the Twin Guns upgrade, doubling the attack speed of the submarine. This made us much stronger, but even so, round 10 got through. It was only one red Bloon, but it stopped us from going straight to Striker like I planned. Instead, we had to pick up bigger globs in the glue for more Pierce to help out with the big rush at the end of the round. Luckily, this also did work on round 11, and it's a cheap upgrade, so I wasn't too mad. But these 2 towers let us get Striker down on round 12, and he upped our defenses a ton. I'm used to the old Striker who struggled in the early game, but now he has more damage and knockback, making him kind of a menace. And he has the range to reach the left track just like the glue gunner. Over the next several rounds, I slowly upgraded the submarine. First airburst starts, but quickly we bought advanced intel and even submergence support. I kept him above the water for now, but I wanted to lock up our camo detection before camos come, as none of our towers can see them without this upgrade. With that in check, I put down our final monkey of the run, the bomb shooter. I'm not used to having 4 monkeys in a challenge like this, but I'm happy to have him. I would have loved to put him in a primary buffing tile, but he needed to be after the sub so he could see DDTs later on, and none of them are that good. The best placement would have been right above the sub, but that only buffs his Pierce and doesn't open up until round 71. Needless to say, I don't think we can wait that long, so I put him down next to Striker and made him a 1-2-0 missile launcher. I was going to go straight for the Moab Mauler upgrade, but I figured we have plenty of time to get that before 40, and the 30s have a couple large rushes of camos, so I went back to the sub and made him a reactor. Now, every Bloon rush and camo Bloon in the near future should be handled, which let us go back to the bomb shooter and make him a 2-3-0 mauler. This smoked the rest of the 30s, but the round 40 Moab slipped through. I tried a couple times as is, but what beat it in the end was upgrading the bomb to an assassin and using his ability to one-shot it. It didn't give me the most hope going forward, but it is what it is. The 40s were a piece of cake as usual and let us save up a ton of money, enough to make our submarine an energizer on round 53. It helps that he's in the discount pond, and now Striker will level up insanely fast and our abilities will have shorter cooldowns. With this upgrade, we also got much better versus ceramics as the sub hits that entire loop. This whole time, I've been waiting to upgrade the glue because I wasn't sure if I should go the top or bottom path. The Bloon Solver would destroy super ceramics late, but the super glue would stop DDTs and other blimps in their tracks. It was a tough call, but I figured I'd try the super glue first, so I upgraded him to a 0-2-4 relentless glue. These slows and stuns, combined with Striker's knockback, add a good amount of extra time inside the sub's radiation, making it even stronger. I was ready for this to show itself on round 63, but the Energizer just deleted the ceramic rushes the moment they came in his range. Where it did help was 64, as slowing these fortified Moabs made them a much more comfortable pop. The rest of the 60s and 70s went off without a hitch. The only time we even used an ability was around 72, where we used the Assassin to take out one of the BFBs. The only challenging parts of these rounds are the BFBs or large ceramic rushes, but we're solid against both of those, and because of that, we were easily able to save up for the super glue upgrade, getting it at the end of round 74. The only thing was this made some rounds last way longer than I wanted because only he and Striker could see the far left loop. This can be good as it lets us stall to get our abilities back, but that wasn't needed right now, so it just slowed us down. You can see this at the end of round 82 where the super ceramics just sit there for a while. But here is where we got our last upgrade, making our bomb shooter a 250 Moab eliminator. He will be our blimp popper while the rest of our monkeys focus the super ceramics, which are starting to worry me. Normal ones are just fine, but whenever fortified ones get to the bend, they get surprisingly far into the energizer, and that can be with the support of other monkeys. But as long as we're on top of our abilities, we should be fine, or so I thought. We did super well until round 93 where one DDT got through. I'm not sure if it was when they got decamoed, a weird lineup of blue, or what, but I felt like we should have been fine. This happened again on the second attempt, but our eliminator's ability came back up just in time to take out the DDT before it leaked, and the BFBs were super easy to handle. This rolled right into 94, which was also smooth sailing, but 95, man, was that tough. We had 3 tier 5 monkeys and a level 20 striker, and the DDTs still managed to get through time and time again. I tried so many different targetings, using abilities at different times, and every combination I could think of. But every time, a few ceramics would sneak through because a DDT got too far along before breaking. But after hours, this is what I did. I switched the Moab eliminator to strong and used his ability once the second DDT passed the first. This clumped them up for a while, but once ceramics turned the corner, we used Striker's stun to pop them and his level 20 ability to make our Elim have double damage and pierce. Here, we started popping the DDTs fast and held the Elim's ability until another DDT turned the corner. Even with this, a black balloon almost got through, but eventually the balloons stopped spawning and we used Striker's stun once all the DDTs were clumped together, and we held strong throughout the rest of the round. 96 took a few tries, but I just spammed our abilities until everything popped, and 97 was more of the same, letting us go into 98 with every ability ready except for the Elims. But once again, we got hard stuck. I tried for so long, and eventually I caved and used the second and final flex monkey of the challenge, the Beast Handler. Even with this, it wasn't easy. Because we only have one of them, we can't make a tier 5 beast, even though we have almost 60k to work with. So we're between the Orca, T-Rex, or Giant Condor, all at minimum power. I tried all 3, but the Orca was the most promising because it can one-shot BFBs, and there were a few attempts with a glimmer of hope. We just had to refine the strat. I put the Orca in the first pool right next to the entrance. Then, when the round started, we used Striker's level 20 ability to refresh the eliminator and one-shot a BFB. Here, the Orca started pulling other BFBs in, and we spammed Concussive Shell to slow the rush down as much as possible. There were countless attempts where I did this and microed other targetings, but what worked here was the simplest solution. Change nothing and use our abilities as often as possible. Things got sketchy several times, with ceramics popping at the back end of the energizer, but the sheer amount of one-shots between the Orca and eliminator got us through the round with almost all of our abilities ready to go for 99. Unfortunately, our Orca can't one-shot DDTs, but we just had to get 3 Elims off after they were visible to pop everything. Easier said than done, but we got through. And round 100 was free. Our bomb shooter broke open the bed early and managed to take out the DDTs with the outer layer, only leaving the ZOMGs inside to deal with. And we double Elim to take them out. Thank goodness this one's over, but we're out of flex monkeys for the rest of the challenge. So hopefully my planning is solid for the rest of the video. Also, if you're enjoying this challenge and ever purchase something in game, please use creator code Hbomb in the store. It helps the channel out a lot. But next, we have Scrapyard, and I'm only bringing in Churchill and a boomerang monkey. Obviously, Churchill is too expensive to start with, so we put our boomer on the bottom left of the crate closest to the crusher. This spot's important because we instantly made him a 001, giving him extra range, which lets him see the loop to his left. This gives him one more spot to attack, which will be super nice for the early and mid game. Unfortunately, he does occasionally miss when the balloons are traveling in the top right, but that'll be fixed with future upgrades. As is, he easily beat the first couple rounds, and in the middle of round 8, we upgraded him to a 002. This brings his damage up to 2 and lets him pop leads in the future. And from here, we slowly made him a 302 glaive ricochet, and once his ranks could bounce from balloon to balloon, it was over. Not even round 15 made it very far, and that's a notoriously hard round. And his whiffs were getting less frequent, especially when the balloons were packed closely together, as his misses would hit the balloons behind it. But with this, we were able to buy Churchill in the middle of round 21. Not bad at all. and I made sure to put him in the top right of the map. This gives him 3 nice straightaways to shoot down, and he's after the boomerang so he can break open black balloons before they get to Churchill. Now, you may be wondering, how are we going to handle the camo green as there's no way we can get Churchill to level 6 in time? Well, that's where the Crusher comes into play. The reason Scrapyard has so many Churchill 2 TCs is because the Crusher can handle the round 24 camo green all on its own, so neither of your monkeys need camo detection here. We do need it by 33 though, so we had to spend $3,435 to get Churchill to level 6 in time. But that wasn't too bad. We had over $1,000 left over, and we could go back to upgrading the boomer. In the mid-30s, we made him a 402 more glaives, and he was tearing apart the rounds. If they weren't camouflaged, he was popping them. That is, until round 40. I wasn't sure how this would go, but even without using Churchill's abilities, we were able to break open the outer layer in the top right circle, and the ceramics did not live long after that. Both of our monkeys just have so much map coverage that we can do some serious damage over the course of this long map. And from here, it was one of the easiest save-ups of the day. I didn't even use an ability or the Crusher, and we were able to buy the Glaive Lord upgrade on round 55. Now, his orbiting glaives look like they only touch the top path, but Moabs and larger actually get hit on the left loop as well, which is super exciting. But his main attack just got ridiculously strong. His orbiting glaives can help with camos, and we can spend the rest of our money leveling up Churchill, which is nice because he's an incredibly slow leveler. And nothing really happened for the next 35 rounds. These two monkeys absolutely dominated the Bloons as we pumped tens of thousands of dollars into Churchill, and he still wasn't max level. But on round 90, this finally came to an end. I didn't use either of Churchill's abilities to see how well he and the Glaive Lord would do against DDTs, and the answer is pretty bad. All 3 of them got through, even though you could see the Glaive Lord's orbiting ranks speed up as they went by. This was expected though, because Churchill can't really damage DDTs without his abilities, as they have the black and lead properties. But a simple Moab barrage changed that. All 3 of them popped open and made for a super easy round. But this was great intel. Now I know we have to have his abilities ready for any round that has DDTs, and in theory, rounds that don't have them should be super easy because both of our monkeys have so much pierce and damage and tons of time to attack that nothing should really get that far. So the 90s were me just watching Super Ceramics get about halfway through the map and waiting to level up Churchill. At round 92, he's still only level 16, so I'm hoping we can get him to level 20 before the game is over. The next round that I thought would be tough was 95. Churchill was able to handle all the camo and lead balloons that intro this round, but then we had to take out the 30 DDTs. We opened with a Moab barrage, and once they got to the top right loop, we used his level 3 ability, armor piercing shells. This lasted just long enough to break open every single DDT, and just like that, we were on to the final few rounds. We upgraded Churchill to level 18 at the start of 96, and we watched a rather unique round. We know by now that it's super spread out, but our monkeys are placed so deep into the map that you can actually see the separation of Moabs, BFBs, and ZOMGs. So it was almost like popping 3 separate waves of balloons rather than one long one. The first 2 waves didn't get that far, but ZOMGs always push a little deeper into the map just because they have so much extra health and large amounts of balloons inside. So this was one of the first times that balloons actually made it around the top left loop, which does put them uncomfortably close to leaking as they only have 1 more pass past our monkeys. However, they were Moabs and smaller, so there was no risk of leaking. We can easily pop things that small in just 1 pass. And that brings us to round 97 and the fortified ZOMGs. We used a Moab barrage early to do some chip damage, and it should easily come off cooldown by the time the round was over. And the main attacks were able to handle the rest, though once again, balloons made it around the top left loop. I'm not a fan of that happening. But this brings us to round 98 with its tons of fortified BFBs and ZOMGs heading our way. I was a little nervous. Most of the outer layers had not broken down by the time they reached Churchill, but even with this, we saw our 2 monkeys go crazy. We were able to break the fortified Moabs open around the Crusher, and the bouncing glaives cleaned up the super ceramics inside. And this actually gave us enough money to get Churchill to level 19 before handling the ZOMGs. And while it was close, we were able to pop them on the last pass. There were tons of Moabs coming towards us, but between Churchill and the Glaive Lord, we were able to clean them up without even using an ability, which left Moab Barrage off cooldown for 99, letting us pop the fortified DDTs with the press of a button. But that's when I saw that we don't have enough money to get Churchill to level 20 for round 100. We're about $8,000 short, so we're sticking with a level 19 Churchill. It would have been amazing to be able to use a level 20 Moab Barrage on the bad, but I guess we'll have to make do. And without this extra damage, we actually leaked on the first attempt. This and round 90 were the only reasons we didn't black border this run, which does say something about how strong these two monkeys are. But on the second take, we used Moab Barrage a bit earlier so that it was off cooldown for when the bad broke open in the top left loop, and we barraged again to pop the DDTs and break open the ZOMGs. No BFB had made it this far the entire run, so I used armor piercing shells to up our damage, and we were able to pop everything just before they got out of range. So we managed to 2 TC Scrapyard, leaving us with 9 monkeys left to use, 6 not including heroes. And the next map is Cabin, where we'll be bringing in ETN, the Wizard, and Helipilot. It was kind of weird using ETN with 2 monkeys that have camo detecting upgrades, but we're not going those paths. I started with the only monkey I could afford, the Wizard, and I picked up Fireball, the typical upgrade you buy for 2 TCs. Now I've done this tens of times, getting a Wizard Lord Phoenix on Logs or Resort, going for an easier combo. The Fireball gives him an extra attack, extra damage, and builds nicely into Wall of Fire that destroys the early game. But I could not beat the early rounds. I'd set him to last to get through 6, but after that I was stuck. So I picked up Guided Magic, did a little bit of micro, and beat 7 and 8, but I just couldn't get past round 9 for the life of me. I was stuck on these first few rounds for about an hour, trying different upgrades, spots, and targetings until I finally messaged Shadow again. Apparently, you have to put the Wizard in a specific spot as a 1/0/0, and with correct micro, you can make it an Arcane Blast for round 9. This increases its damage from 1 to 2, and takes out the greens no problem. It even let us save straight up for ETN, which we put next to the Tire Swing. Here, he has pretty solid map coverage, and he's close enough to our Wizard to give him extra range later on. Now we can pick up Fireball to give us a little more damage. And although I wanted to get the Wall of Fire upgrade, this was the perfect time to push for the Helipilot. If we can get him down, we'd get a huge boost in global popping power. It's just a matter of if we can save up the $1,600. And at the start of round 19, we finally had enough money to get him down. And boy, did we like that extra damage. From here, it was simple. We probably could have gone just about any route, but what I did was pick up Pursuit on the Helipilot so I didn't have to micro him anymore. I picked up Wall of Fire on the Wizard to help with leads and any rushes that get that far, and we saved up $6,000. I wasn't sure if we'd have to spend money leveling up ETN or if we could get away with using his drone swarm anytime a tough camo rush came, because currently he's the only one that can see camos. Luckily, his ability was enough, so we didn't have to spend any money on him. And instead, we could make our Helipilot a 302 Razor Rotors and our Wizard a 230 Dragon's Breath, adding a ton of damage to our setup. This pretty easily made it to the round 40 Moab, which the Helipilot broke open about halfway through the map, and the ceramics popped at the Wall of Fire. Then ETN hit level 8 and gave our monkeys camo detection at the perfect time, round 42, so we are set for camos for the rest of the game. From here, the plan was simple. We're going to upgrade our 2 towers to tier 5s, and we don't have to spend any money on ETN as he's tied for the fastest leveler in the game. So he's going to hit 20 all by himself.
Good boy.
So we saved up. On round 49, we upgraded the Helipilot to an Apache Dart ship, and again on 77 to an Apache Prime, which dominated the next several rounds. This let us get the Wizard to a Wizard Lord Phoenix at the start of round 94, and around this time is when the Bloons finally started pushing deep into the map. ETN and the Apache Prime are not the best versus DDTs, so we had to use the Wizard Lord Phoenix's ability on round 95. I waited until they were turning the final corner in the bottom right before activating it, and we quickly caught up on them all, popping the last of them and moving on to round 96 before the Phoenix was even done. And 96 lasted long enough that by the time we got to the ZOMGs, the Phoenix was back off cooldown, so I used it here again. This made me a little worried about 97, as I thought we might have to use some abilities, but we just broke open the ZOMGs one at a time and handled the insides no problem. 98 though. Some Bloons got through for the first time in 70 rounds. It wasn't too surprising though, as I didn't use any abilities. I was trying to save the Wizards for 99, but after quite a few Bloons got through, I redid the round and used it right away. I figured this would pop the ZOMGs and a ton of BFBs at the start of the round, and it would be off cooldown for 99, and this worked flawlessly. Not only did it clear half the round, it was easily off cooldown. So we went into 99 with all of our abilities ready, and ETN hit level 20. So his ability now gives the normal damage type when activated, which is huge for DDTs. That being said, we didn't need it here. We just used the Phoenix again, and it popped all the fortified ones, letting us move on to the bad. This thing was swimming through the map without a care in the world until the lava chicken came back off cooldown, which we used instantly. And once the bad broke open, we used ETN's UCAF for a huge burst in damage, letting us take out the DDTs almost instantly, and the ZOMGs didn't last much longer. So we beat Cabin with only 3 more monkeys. Next, we have one of the easiest maps in the game, Resort, and we're doing a very popular 2TC, the Spike Factory and Tack Shooter. We started off by putting our tack in the top right of the small square and slowly upgraded him to a 302 hot shots. This is able to solo the early game except for camos, so we followed it up by placing a Spike Factory at the exit. These two work very well together, and we were able to put all of our money into this factory. On round 37, we made it a 204 deadly spikes and had its piles going to the very back of the track. The reason we're doing this is because the Tack Shooter doesn't have camo detection, so we have to save as many spikes as possible for the camos. We can't be wasting them on balloons that the Tack Shooter will pop. But after this, we upgraded the hot shots to a 402 ring of fire and we're ready for the Moab to come. The Tack Shooter popped his outer layer on the second pass and managed to bring the ceramics down to yellows here. And after they whizzed around the outside, he popped all of them before they got to the spikes. Not bad. But from here, we had to save up a ton of money. The only things left to buy are tier 5 upgrades. And as much as I want to upgrade the Ring of Fire to an Inferno Ring, we actually have to get the Permaspike first to handle all the camos that come later. For the most part, the rounds were pretty easy, but every once in a while I would get scared at the amount of camos just running around the map, like all the rainbows that came around 56. I know we had a large pile of spikes waiting for them, but that many rainbows is scary to see just sprinting for the exit. But at the end of this rush, we were able to upgrade the Spike Factory to a Permaspike. So in a couple rounds, we'll have a huge wall of spikes protecting the exit. As for the Ring of Fire, it was still breaking Moabs down to yellows at this point, which was a nice sight. But now, it's time to save up for the Inferno Ring. BFBs were funny because the Ring of Fire could break them down to Moabs after the first pass, but couldn't break the blimps open before they got to this factory. So we would just send 4 Moabs straight into the spikes, which the Permaspike could easily handle. But we can tell that the Ring of Fire is getting outscaled quickly. Any normal balloon he could still handle just fine, it's just the BFBs and fortified Moabs that were causing him trouble. The latter would have several bandages on them, so he did do a ton of damage, but it was kind of up to the Permaspike to clean up any tankier blimp. Luckily for us, the 60s and 70s actually make you a ton of money, and the Permaspike can easily handle anything the Ring of Fire couldn't. There were a couple times you can see the spike pile getting a bit low, like on around 75, but even at this point, there was still a huge safety net at the back of the track. The other type of balloon that can get through now is purple. Earlier, when we had a hot shots, it could handle purple balloons, but now that it only shoots fire, purples get through unscathed. Luckily, they don't munch up all his pierce, so the Ring of Fire can still damage the rainbows or BFB that layer on top of them, like on round 78 for example. But the purples did eat up a ton of spikes. Not enough to get through, but it was something worth noticing. But in the middle of round 79, we were finally able to afford the $49,000 upgrade, the Inferno Ring, and he instantly started melting the balloons. His meteor could crack open the tankier blimps, and nothing really got through his main attack. This was timed perfectly as the ZOMG came the next round and didn't even make it around the small square. That's how strong the Inferno Ring is. But remember how we have heroes to spare? Well, there's no point in not placing down a hero, so I added Benjamin. While not the most useful in a Chimps challenge, I wanted him to hit level 10 by the late game to make some rounds even easier. And even though he loses you money in Chimps, I got him after our last purchase, so money doesn't really do anything for us anymore. From here, only a couple rounds were exciting. Round 95 was soloed by the Permaspike surprisingly easily, while 96 and 97 were handled by the Inferno Ring. This map is just made for the Tack Shooter, as they have to pass through his main attack so many times, and the track is so long that he gets to pepper them with meteors as they go around. But then round 98 came. I thought this was going to be free, so I didn't even use Ben's siphon funding until after the ZOMGs, but thank goodness I still used it, because fortified super ceramics could actually get by the Inferno Ring on the final pass, and plenty of them did, making our pile noticeably smaller. I used this ability again on 99, but it doesn't affect DDTs, so it didn't really make a difference. All of them made it to the spikes, but didn't really threaten leaking. And that just leaves round 100. It's a big enough blimp that when it got to the first turn, it actually hit the spikes, causing it to break open, and not leaving us many to pop the DDTs inside. They zoomed around the track and almost got through. We only had 2 spikes remaining after popping them, way closer than I thought it'd be. But the Inferno Ring easily cleaned up the ZOMGs, beating Resort. But that brings us to the final map, Skates. And we only have 2 monkeys and a hero left. So we're running Rosalia, the Dart Monkey, and Dartling Gunner. An odd trio to end it. The start was pretty tricky as it took a few tries to get the dart in the right spot, but eventually we found it. He was the only monkey we could afford, so we made him a 0-2-1, giving it extra attack speed and range to handle the first couple rounds. If we set him to last, we could get through round 6 just fine. In the middle of round 7, we picked up enhanced eyesight for a little more range, which helps line up some shots, and then we just head to micro to pop the 1 red balloon that got through in the first wave. I thought we'd be able to just leave him on last, but round 8 was a bit tougher with the greens that came, and some would occasionally get through, but switching him to strong did wonders as he'd bring these down to blues and reds, making it easy to clean them up on the big loop to his right. We're getting close to the crossbow upgrade, but round 9 was even harder. We had to switch between strong and first to get through, and man was this one close. We had several snipes where the dart would continue over the water and hit the balloons earlier in the track, and near the end of the round he popped one that was out of his range with a clear path to leaking. A very close one. But in the middle of round 10, we upgraded this guy to a 0-2-3 crossbow, and the early rounds were locked up. From here, we were able to go straight to Rosalia, getting her down on round 14. I put her a little further forward so that she could take advantage of the small loop on the left, and waited for her to hit level 2. Here, I switched her to grenade mode, which does better against dense packs of balloons and can pop leads, even though we're facing a good amount of pinks and yellows right now. I figured the crossbow could handle these stronger balloons, while Rosalia could help counter the dense rushes, and I wouldn't have to worry about lead balloons coming later on. Directly following this, we got down a Dartling gunner at the very back of the track. Instantly, I made him a 1-0-0, so he had increased accuracy, and we slowly upgraded him to a 2-2-0, so he has camo detection, much more attack speed, and the laser damage over time effect. So he's actually providing a good amount of damage from the other side of the map. This combo smoked the rounds, and there were tons of directions we could go, but I opted to upgrade our crossbow to a sharpshooter. This will add a good amount of damage to the front of the track, which I thought would be especially helpful for the round 40 Moab. Now, Rosalia normally makes round 40 super easy, as you can fly her around to be global and use scatter missile to shred the ceramics, but neither was needed. She just hit level 7, so that wasn't off cooldown, but the Moab broke open in the small loop, and the ceramics melted under the pressure of our sharpshooter. This put us in the 40s, and I figured we could either upgrade our Dartling to a Plasma Accelerator, which is a mid-game menace, or we could try to push for the Crossbow Master. This guy would basically solo the mid game, and I figured if we couldn't make that save up, we could always fall back on the Dartling upgrades. As we know by now, the 40s are super easy. Barely anything pushed past the small loop, and we were able to afford the Crossbow Master in the middle of round 49, a super early tier 5, and you can see the power that it brought. The Moabs in the 50s felt like they were barely entering the screen. The BFB on round 60 popped as he was entering the small loop, and really only fortified blimps pushed into the screen. All the while, we were upgrading the Dartling gunner. We made him a 4-2-0 Plasma Accelerator and started saving up for that glorious Ray of Doom upgrade. Now, I didn't do the math on whether we'd be able to afford it, but the Crossbow Master is so cheap, I figured we'd get it down at least in the 90s, and the combination of these three monkeys dominated. The first bloom that really got that far was the round 80 ZOMG, which did make it around the second loop, but I was not microing the Dartling. Round 81 also made it pretty far with the super ceramics, but that was expected because the Crossbow Master struggles once they start showing up in the 80s. But what caught me off guard was we actually leaked on round 82. Some fortified super ceramics got through. Our saving grace was that I had the Packle locked to the start of the track. Once we manually aimed him, things got significantly better, but some of the ceramics still made it to the penguins up top, which isn't reassuring. We only made it to round 84 before leaking again, which is concerning because we're not that close to the Ray of Doom upgrade. What we can do to up our damage though is start using Rosalia's abilities. Kinetic Charge adds a ton of damage. She can use both of her weapons during the jetpack ability, and Scatter Missile does some solid damage to blimps and ceramics alike. On top of this, we popped the blimps open with the Plasma Accelerator and let it do passive damage over time to the ceramics with its laser shock effect. So round 84 actually looked pretty easy after these changes. I wasn't sure what to expect for round 85, but I switched Rosalia to her laser instead of the grenade, which gives her amazing knockback on blimps, and we used the Packle to break open the ZOMGs one at a time. The balloons inside still got pretty far, but splitting up the round made it much easier. I was getting pretty nervous for the next couple rounds though. 86 has plenty of fortified BFBs that I wasn't sure how we would deal with, but between some Packle Micro and a Kinetic Charge, we actually did pretty well. 87 though, 4 ZOMGs. That's significantly harder to break up than the 2 of 85. With some careful timing, we were able to break open the first 2 and split up the round that way. Rosalia's knockback was helping out a bunch to stall the round, but boy were there a lot of ceramics that came pouring out of these green turtles. We defocused the Plasma Accelerator on these large rushes of ceramics, and the Crossbow Master helped out when he could, but we were able to catch up on them on the final loop, and once we popped the first 2 ZOMGs, it wasn't too hard to pop the second 2. We could focus all 3 of our monkeys on them instead of being split up. But this put us about $3,000 away from the Ray of Doom upgrade, so I knew we should be fine as all 3 of our abilities were off cooldown. That being said, 88 went surprisingly smooth. We were able to handle this start of the round, which is all BFBs just fine. We had been taking on either ZOMGs or fortified BFBs in the past, so this was a nice change of pace. And then 2 ZOMGs end the round, which we just handled 4 of, so we were actually set up pretty well for this. I even threw in a kinetic charge to make it easier, and after the round was over, we upgraded our Dartling to a 5-2-0 Ray of Doom and locked him to the start of the track. Now, this guy can basically solo a game of chimps, so him, Rosalia, and the Crossbow Master should be more than enough to beat the rest of the game. And enough it was. Nothing posed a threat. We popped just about every Bloon off screen until the late 90s. 98 and 99 were the first rounds to make it around the initial loop, but even that is only like 5% of the way through the map, and round 100 actually lived longer than I thought. I used our abilities, letting us break open the outer layer halfway through the loop, and the insides made it to the center of the map. I thought maybe the DDTs would get here, but even the ceramics inside the ZOMGs did, easily the furthest any Bloon got since we bought the Ray of Doom. But with this win, we used the rest of our towers, so we capped at beating 13 different maps without reusing a single monkey or hero. If you want to see me do this challenge, but for every mode of a single map, click this video right here.